Funny, isn't it, how people talk about poverty? They measure it in coins, in salaries, in the size of a house or the brand of a car. They think poverty lives in empty pockets, in an unpaid bill, in the sound of a stomach that has skipped too many meals. And yes, that is a kind of poverty, a harsh one, a painful one, but not the deepest kind. The deepest kind is harder to see. It does not live in the wallet. It lives in the mind. True poverty is when you no longer believe you can rise. True poverty is when you convince yourself that tomorrow will look no different than today, no matter what you do. True poverty is when you surrender to despair before the battle even begins. And if you listen closely, you can hear it in the way people speak. I can't. I'm not good enough. This is just my fate. Those are not just words. They are walls, invisible walls, that rise up around a person until they cannot see the sky anymore. I've seen men who had nothing, not a penny to their name, yet they walked as if they owned the ground beneath their feet. And I've seen men who had plenty, but they walked bent, afraid, always clutching at what they might lose. Tell me, between the two, who is truly poor? You wake up each morning with the same thoughts, the same fears, the same quiet belief that life has already been decided for you. You watch others rise, others build, others carry a light inside them, and you whisper to yourself, "That isn't for me." That whisper, more than the lack of money, is what keeps you chained. Because money, in truth, can come and go. It flows like water through rivers and streams. But the state of your mind, that is the well from which you drink every day. If that well is poisoned with doubt, with fear, with resignation, then it doesn't matter how much water you gather. You will always feel thirsty. Do you see? Poverty of the mind is more dangerous than poverty of the hand. A poor hand can still learn to work, to build, to create. But a poor mind, one that has surrendered hope, will not even try. And maybe you know this feeling. Maybe you've had moments when the world outside was calm, but inside you felt small, powerless, already defeated. It is like a storm that never passes. You sit in a quiet room, yet the thunder is in your chest. That is where true poverty begins. Not in the streets, not in the marketplace, but in that quiet room, in the unseen storm of the mind. And unless you see it for what it is, you will mistake the symptom for the cause. You will chase money, thinking it will silence the storm. You will chase possessions, thinking they will make the walls fall down. But if your mind remains poor, nothing you gather will ever feel enough. So I tell you this, not to scold you, but to remind you, the first battle is not out there in the world. The first battle is in here, in the way you think, in the way you speak to yourself when no one is listening. Poverty of money can be changed with time, but poverty of the mind, if left unseen, can last a lifetime. And maybe that is what no one ever told you.
I once knew a man who won the lottery. Overnight, his life changed. He went from working in a small factory, hands calloused from years of labor, to holding more money than he had ever seen in his life. And for a time, it seemed like everything was different. He bought a car he had always dreamed of, a house larger than he needed, gifts for friends who praised his good fortune. But inside, nothing had changed. The fears were still there, the habits of doubt, the voices of "I can't" still whispered in his ear. Within a few years, the money was gone. The house was sold. The car was broken down. And the friends who once cheered for him no longer came around. What happened? Did the world betray him? No. He was still carrying the same poverty he had always carried. The money only covered it for a little while, like a coat thrown over a broken chair. It looked good on the outside, but inside it was still falling apart. That is the danger of mistaking money for wealth. Money is an instrument, a tool. True wealth is in the way you think, in the way you face life, in the way you respond to storms. If the mind is poor, no amount of money will make you rich. I have also known a woman who lived with almost nothing. She rented a single room, worked long hours sewing clothes, and never had more than a few coins left after paying for food and rent. Yet, there was something about her. When she spoke, there was warmth. When she laughed, it filled the room. She did not hide her struggle, but she did not bow to it either. She dreamed, she read, she saved what little she could, not with fear, but with patience. And in time, she rose. Slowly, steadily. Not because she started with wealth, but because she never let her mind become poor. She kept the door of her mind open, even when the door of her room was small and narrow. Do you see the contrast? One man had plenty, but remained poor. One woman had little, but remained rich. This is why I say true poverty has little to do with coins or notes. It is the poverty of spirit, of imagination, of courage that truly starves a person. And maybe this is why so many people feel trapped. They are waiting for money to come before they change their mind. They are waiting for life to hand them a better hand of cards before they decide to play differently. But it does not work like that. Life rarely gives to those who wait in despair. It gives to those who rise in spirit, even when the pockets are empty. Think of a child. A child does not look at a toy and say, "I cannot have joy until I own it." A child imagines. A child turns a stick into a sword, a blanket into a castle, a patch of dirt into an entire kingdom. That is wealth of mind. To see beyond what is in front of you, to create something from almost nothing. Somewhere along the way, many lose that gift. They trade imagination for resignation. They trade hope for fear. And in so doing, they trade wealth for poverty, even if their bank account grows. True poverty is not only what you lack, it is what you stop believing is possible. I think often of a saying from an old teacher of mine. The man who says, "I cannot," is already defeated, while the man who says, "I will try," has already begun. Such a simple truth. Yet how many carry the words, "I cannot," like a badge of honor, as though their helplessness is proof of who they are? That is the poverty that strangles potential. And here is the part most people miss. The world does not pity poverty of the mind. It does not reward despair. Life simply passes by those who have already decided not to fight. The storms come to everyone. The losses, the failures, the betrayals. These are not unique to the poor or the rich. The difference is in the response. Do you bow your head and say, "See, this always happens to me"? Or do you lift your eyes and say, "Yes, the storm has come, but I remain standing"? That choice, that small, invisible choice, is the line between poverty and wealth. Not the size of the storm, but the strength of the mind that faces it. And perhaps, if you are honest with yourself, you can feel those chains within. The chains of old words spoken to you long ago. Words you still repeat to yourself when no one else is listening. The chains of comparison, when you measure your life by what others have and find yourself lacking. The chains of fear, when you hesitate before every step forward, afraid of failing, afraid of being seen, afraid of change. Those chains are heavy, but they are not made of iron. They are made of thought. And what is made of thought can be broken by thought. Not at once, not easily, but slowly, patiently, as you begin to see, poverty is not a prison outside of you. It is a prison within you. And the first crack in the wall comes when you dare to believe that it isn't permanent.
If you pay attention, you will notice that most of the poverty in your life does not come from the world outside, but from the stories you tell yourself inside. Stories repeated so often, they begin to sound like truth. You whisper them in the morning when you are still half asleep. You carry them in your head as you walk through the day. You let them echo when you fail at something small or when you see someone else succeed. And each time you repeat them, you add another brick to the walls around you. I was never meant to succeed. I don't deserve better. People like me don't get far. Do those words sound familiar? They are not just thoughts. They are chains. And yet, because they are invisible, you hardly notice how heavy they've become. The danger is not that life is difficult. The danger is that you begin to narrate your own defeat before life has even decided the outcome. You take every stumble as proof that you were right all along, that you were never meant to rise. And so, in a strange way, you end up feeding the very poverty that hurts you. Fear plays its part as well. Fear is a master storyteller. It will whisper, "Don't try, don't risk, don't step forward." It convinces you that the pain of moving will be greater than the pain of staying. But what fear never tells you is that staying stuck, staying silent, staying small, creates a suffering that never ends. I've seen many who live in this quiet prison. They smile on the outside, they go about their routines, but inside they are carrying a constant sense of defeat. Not because the world has defeated them, but because they have accepted the story that says, "I am defeated." There is an old parable of an elephant chained to a small post. When it was young, the chain was strong enough to hold it. It struggled, it pulled, but could not break free. Over time, it stopped trying. When it grew into a massive animal strong enough to tear the post from the ground, it no longer bothered. The chain remained, not because it was unbreakable,
but because the elephant believed it was. So it is with the human mind. The chain is rarely as strong as we think it is. But if you tell yourself the same story long enough, you no longer test its strength. You simply accept it. You live with it. You call it your fate. And this, more than any empty pocket, is true poverty. Think for a moment about the habits you keep. Habits of thought, habits of speech, habits of reaction. When something goes wrong, do you immediately say, "Of course, that's just my luck"? When an opportunity comes, do you shrink back, thinking, "I'm not ready"? Each of these small habits feeds the poverty within, not in large, dramatic ways, but in slow, steady drops, like water hollowing out stone. And perhaps this is the most tragic part. You do not notice it happening. A day passes, then a week, then a year. You still walk the same path, tell the same story, believe the same limits. And one day you wake up realizing half your life has been lived inside a cage of your own making. But here is something I want you to remember. Just as you can feed poverty with your thoughts, you can also feed strength. You can tell yourself new stories. You can break the rhythm of despair with the rhythm of hope. It will not happen in an instant. You cannot erase years of thought in a single morning. But you can begin, and beginning is already an act of wealth. When you whisper to yourself, "Perhaps I can," you plant a seed. When you look at a failure and say, "This does not define me," you water that seed. When you take one small step forward despite the fear, you let that seed see the sun. And slowly, in time, what once was barren soil begins to grow. Do you see the contrast? Poverty of the mind is not an unchangeable curse. It is a garden left untended. Weeds have grown because nothing else was planted, but a garden can always be renewed. The first step is to notice the stories you tell yourself, to pause long enough to hear them clearly, and when you do, to ask, "Are these words true, or are they just chains I've grown used to wearing?" Because if you can begin to see that the story is not the truth, then a door opens, and through that door, a different life becomes possible.
There is a strange thing about the mind. It craves comfort. It longs for the familiar, even when the familiar is the very thing that keeps you poor. You would think people run from pain and chase growth, but more often they run from growth and choose the pain they already know. Comfort is not always soft chairs and warm rooms. Sometimes comfort is the routine of despair. Comfort is waking up each day to the same limits because those limits have become familiar. You know them. You can predict them. And the human mind often prefers a predictable prison to an unpredictable freedom. Think of it like this. A bird kept in a cage for too long may fear the open sky. The cage may be small, but it is familiar. The bird knows where the perch is, where the water sits, how the days pass. Open the door, and instead of flying, it may cling to the bars. Freedom is vast, but freedom is uncertain. And uncertainty frightens the cage. So it is with people. You may complain about your job, yet you never leave. You speak of your dreams, yet you never act. You may ache for change, yet you stay still. Why? Because the known suffering feels safer than the unknown possibility. And that is how comfort becomes poverty's disguise. I once knew a man who worked in the same place for 30 years. He hated it. Each morning he cursed under his breath as he put on his uniform. Each evening he returned home drained, with a quiet bitterness in his eyes. He dreamed of starting something of his own. He even had the skills. But year after year he stayed. Why? He would say, "It's safe. At least I know what I have." But what he had was not safety. It was a slow death. The poverty of the mind that whispered, "Better the chains you know than the sky you don't." Now, I am not telling you to throw caution to the wind, to abandon reason, to leap without thought. No. What I am saying is that comfort can blind you. It can whisper that you are safe, when in truth you are only stagnant. And stagnation is its own kind of poverty. There is an old saying, "Ships are safe in the harbor," but that is not what ships are built for. A ship tied to the dock will never sink in the storm, but it will also never cross the ocean. It will never discover new lands. It will simply rot slowly where it sits. And isn't that what happens to so many? Not a dramatic fall, not a sudden collapse, but a slow rotting of spirit, a quiet shrinking of the soul, until one day they realize they have lived more years inside a cage of comfort than in the wildness of possibility. Do you see how this connects to true poverty? Because the man who accepts his cage has already surrendered the wealth of his mind. He has chosen predictability over possibility, resignation over creation. Even if his paycheck is steady, even if his bills are paid, he is not rich. He is poor in the deepest sense because his spirit no longer dares to move. And perhaps you have felt this too, that quiet pull between what you long for and what you settle for, that tension between the dream in your chest and the voice in your head that says, "Stay where you are, it's safer here." But safety without growth is not safety, it is suffocation. The storms of life will come, whether you stay in the cage or step into the sky. Poverty of the mind tells you to cling to the bars, to stay small, to hope that by doing less you will hurt less. But the truth is the opposite. The smaller you make yourself, the more the storms toss you around. The more you hide, the weaker you feel. And so the trap of comfort deepens the poverty you are trying to escape. You trade your future for the illusion of safety. You trade your wings for the memory of flight. But a mind that is alive does not settle. It may rest for a time, but it does not surrender. It may take cautious steps, but it does not stop walking. It may feel fear, but it does not mistake fear for truth. Because true wealth, wealth of the spirit, wealth of the mind, means daring to step beyond what is comfortable,
even when it trembles your bones. And perhaps the first act of breaking free from poverty is not earning more, not gathering more, not even changing your job or your house. Perhaps the first act is simply this: to stop calling the cage your home.
There is another seed of poverty that grows quietly in the mind, and it is one that almost everyone has watered at some point: comparison. It begins small. You see a neighbor with a new car, and suddenly your own feels old. You see a friend posting pictures of travel, and suddenly your days feel empty. You hear of someone earning more, and suddenly your own efforts feel worthless. Nothing in your life has changed, but the story in your head tells you that you are lacking. That is how comparison works. It does not add truth to your life, it subtracts peace from it. And if you allow it, comparison will convince you that no matter what you have, it is never enough. You may build a house, but someone else's will be bigger. You may reach a milestone, but someone else will reach it sooner. You may finally feel content until you glance sideways and see another who seems to shine brighter. That glance, that sideways gaze, is where poverty sneaks in. Not the poverty of your wallet, but of your spirit. Because the moment you measure your worth by another's life, you hand your wealth away. You let someone else's journey decide how rich or poor you feel. I once knew a young man who worked hard, saved every coin, and finally managed to open a small shop. For him, it was a victory. For his family, it was stability they had never known. But instead of celebrating, he grew bitter, because down the street another man had opened a larger shop with more customers. His own achievement turned to ashes in his mouth, not because it wasn't good, but because comparison told him it wasn't good enough. That is the cruelty of comparison. It robs joy, and in robbing joy, it plants poverty. But there is another story, too. I remember an old farmer who tilled a small patch of land with his own hands. His neighbors had larger fields, bigger harvests. But when asked about his life, he smiled and said, "This land feeds me. This land feeds my children. This land is enough." You could feel the wealth in his voice, even though by every measure of the world he had little. Do you see the difference? Wealth is not the number of fields you own. Wealth is the ability to look at what you have and know it is enough for today, while still believing tomorrow may bring more. Poverty is the constant hunger that no field, no house, no number can ever satisfy. And the strange truth is this: when you compare, you are always comparing against an illusion. You see the car, but not the debt. You see the smile in the photo, but not the loneliness after the camera is put away. You see the victory, but not the years of struggle that came before it. You compare your entire life with its valleys and shadows against a single shining moment in someone else's. It is never a fair fight. Comparison is a thief. And yet so many invite it in every day. They open the door wide, scrolling endlessly, measuring endlessly, never realizing they are feeding their own poverty of mind. You must ask yourself, how much of your suffering comes not from what you truly lack, but from what you imagine you lack because you looked at another? How many nights have you spent restless, not because your life is empty, but because you decided it was empty after measuring it against someone else's? The irony is that while you are busy measuring, life is passing. The field in front of you lies untilled. The gifts in your hands remain unused. The wealth within you remains unopened. And so comparison does not just poison your joy, it steals your time, your energy, your chance to grow. To live free of this poison does not mean never seeing others, never noticing their success. It means seeing without measuring. It means being glad for another without making their path a mirror for your own. It means remembering that your road, your struggles, your blessings are uniquely yours. When you can do that, when you can look at what you have with gratitude rather than resentment, you break another link in the chain of poverty. Because the richest life is not the one with the most treasures, it is the one that stops believing it is always lacking. And perhaps, if you are quiet for a moment, you will notice you already have more than you once prayed for. You already live in blessings someone else is still dreaming of. You are standing right now in a field that someone else would call wealth. Comparison hides this truth. Gratitude reveals it. And gratitude, more than money, is the beginning of true wealth.
There is a kind of poverty more subtle than empty hands. It is the poverty of a restless spirit, always busy, always moving, yet going nowhere. Look around and you will see it everywhere. People rushing from one task to the next, phones buzzing, screens glowing, schedules full. They say, "I have no time. I am working hard. I am chasing life." And yet, ask them where they are headed, and the answer is often silence. Busyness feels like progress. It feels like wealth. But if you are not careful, it becomes the greatest disguise for poverty of the mind. Because to be busy is not the same as to be growing. To be busy is not the same as to be alive. I once knew a man who worked from sunrise until midnight. His table was covered in papers. His phone never left his hand. He prided himself on how much he was doing. But when I asked him quietly, "What is all of this building toward?" he looked away. He had no answer. His life was motion without direction, and motion without direction is not wealth. It is exhaustion dressed as achievement. This is how poverty of the mind traps so many. It convinces you that if you are moving, you must be living. If you are busy, you must be building. But a man can run in circles for years and end up exactly where he began, and many do. The truth is, distraction is a kind of hunger.
The mind, unwilling to face its own silence, fills itself with noise, and that noise feels like something. But it is nothing, just movement, just escape, just another way to avoid the quiet work of facing who you are. Think of a farmer who spends all day walking his field, pulling at leaves, rearranging tools, pacing back and forth. At the end of the day, he is tired, his brow is wet, but no seed has been planted, no soil has been turned. His labor was real, but his progress was none. How many of us live this way, always busy, always tired, yet no closer to breaking free from poverty of the mind? Because poverty is not just the absence of wealth, it is the absence of purpose. There is another story I remember. A woman who spent an hour each morning in silence before beginning her day. She had little by worldly standards, but she guarded that hour like treasure. In that silence, she thought, she dreamed, she planned, and from that stillness came clarity. Each action after that had meaning. Each choice moved her closer to something she could name. She was not busy in the eyes of the world, but she was rich in direction. Do you see the difference? The man filled his days with motion and felt empty. The woman filled her silence with thought and lived full. Poverty is not measured by how little you do, nor wealth by how much you do. Both are measured by why you do them. And yet, the world encourages distraction. It rewards busyness. It praises those who never stop moving, even when their movement is hollow. But if you are not careful, you will spend your life building ladders that lean against the wrong wall. You will climb high, only to find the view is empty. True wealth begins in stillness. It begins in the courage to be quiet long enough to hear your own heart. It begins in the discipline to choose fewer steps, but to take them in the right direction. Perhaps this is why so many feel poor, even when their days are full. They are busy, but they are not alive. They are distracted, but they are not awake. They are surrounded by motion, but they are starved of meaning. And meaning is the true currency of a rich life. Without it, all the busyness in the world leaves you bankrupt. So I ask you, are you truly moving forward, or are you only moving? Are you spending your days in noise, or are you giving yourself the silence to listen, to dream, to begin again? Because if you do not stop and ask, the illusion of busyness will rob you quietly until years pass and you realize you were always running, but never arriving. And that, too, is poverty.
The path out of poverty never truly begins with how much money you hold in your hands. It begins with how you think about yourself, about the world, and about the possibilities that lie before you. A poor mind waits for the world to change. It waits for luck, for charity, for the government, or for some miraculous event to alter its circumstances. But a rich mind begins in a very different place. It starts small, quietly planting new seeds of thought, even while the soil of life still looks barren. This is why two people can stand in the same situation, same income, same struggles, same apparent lack of opportunity, and yet move in opposite directions. One sinks deeper into despair, while the other begins to climb. What changed? Not the environment, not the paycheck, not the external world. What changed was the inner conversation. When you think in poverty, you always focus on what you lack. You repeat to yourself, "I don't have enough money. I don't know the right people. I wasn't born into the right family." These sentences become chains that tie you down. But when you think in wealth, you begin to ask a different kind of question. What can I learn today? Who can I help? What skill can I build? What value can I create? These questions are like keys, unlocking doors that others don't even see. Let me tell you something important. Wealth, at its root, is not a bank balance. It is the ability to see possibilities where others only see problems. It is the discipline to act, even in small ways, when others are frozen by fear. It is the quiet confidence that says, even if I start small, I can grow. This is why some people, when they finally lose everything, rise again, and others, even when handed a fortune, lose it in a short time. The difference lies not in what they had, but in who they were on the inside. So ask yourself gently, have you been waiting for life to change before you change your thoughts? Or will you begin to cultivate wealth in your mind first, trusting that the outer world will eventually reflect the inner one? The truth is, poverty ends the moment you stop identifying yourself as poor. It ends when you stop saying, "This is just who I am," and begin to say, "This is who I am becoming." It may not happen overnight. It may take years of sowing small seeds of effort, learning, and patience. But in time, those inner seeds grow into outer fruit. And when that happens, money will follow naturally. Because money is drawn to value. And value is created by a mind that is already rich. So start today, not with a lottery ticket, not with someone else's rescue, but with your own thoughts. Replace every phrase of lack with a phrase of possibility, and you will notice something astonishing. Even before the world changes, you will feel richer already. And that feeling, that new identity, is the soil in which all true wealth is grown.
When your mind shifts, the world shifts with it. That is the quiet miracle that few notice, because it does not happen with fireworks or noise. It happens in the small, almost invisible changes. The way you rise in the morning with a different energy, the way you speak with more certainty, the way your eyes no longer search for pity, but for possibility. True poverty, as I've told you, is not measured in coins or possessions, but in the weight of despair that sits upon the heart. And true wealth, equally, is not in luxury or excess, but in the freedom of a mind that believes in growth, in renewal, in its own capacity to shape the future. Let me tell you something simple yet profound. The most valuable treasure is the ability to imagine a different tomorrow. A poor mind says, "This is the way things are, and they will never change." A renewed mind says, "Things are this way now, but they can be different because I can be different." That single shift in belief has lifted countless souls from darkness into light. Wealth is not always seen in the bank account at first. It begins in the habits of thought that accumulate interest day by day. A person who constantly thinks of lack will naturally live out lack. But the one who trains the mind to see abundance, opportunities, lessons, strengths, will soon find that life reflects back what the mind projects. This is why some people rise even in the harshest conditions, while others remain stuck even with every advantage. The difference is not luck. The difference is not who their parents were or what school they attended. The difference is the state of their inner economy, whether they invested in fear or in hope. My friend, I do not say this to sound poetic. I say it because it is practical truth. A mind bound by poverty cannot hold on to wealth, even if it is given. But a mind renewed by vision, discipline, and gratitude will attract and multiply even the smallest seed of opportunity. So here is the great paradox. The richest wealth you can ever possess is the inner certainty that you are no longer poor, even before the outer signs appear. Once that conviction takes root, you walk differently, you speak differently, you carry yourself with quiet dignity, and sooner than you expect, the world begins to rearrange itself around that inner reality. True poverty ends the moment your mind awakens to its own power. True wealth begins the moment you refuse to let circumstances define who you are. That, my dear listener, is the quiet wealth of a renewed mind.
So, we have walked together through this long journey of truth. You have heard me speak of poverty, not as numbers on a bank statement, but as a way of thinking, a way of living, a silent agreement people make with despair. And you have also heard me speak of wealth, not as golden coins or towering houses, but as freedom of spirit, clarity of mind, and courage of heart. Now, let me leave you with this. You are not destined to stay poor. Poverty may visit you, but it does not have to own you. It may be part of your story, but it is not your identity. Too many people carve their names into the stone of their suffering, believing it will never change. They tell themselves, "This is who I am. This is all I'll ever be." But the truth is gentler and far more powerful. Who you are is always larger than where you are. The world is filled with people who once had nothing, no wealth, no connections, no advantage. but they had a mind that refused to bow down to despair. They rose not because life was easy, but because they chose to believe in the possibility of growth. If they could do it, so can you. I do not say this to flatter you. I say it because it is the plain truth. You are not powerless. You are not without tools. You have something far greater than money already. The ability to think, to learn, to adapt, to change. That is wealth waiting to be unlocked. Here is the final secret I want you to remember. Poverty is loud, but wealth is quiet. Poverty shouts through complaints, excuses, and bitterness. Wealth whispers through discipline, patience, and small daily acts of faith. If you listen closely, you will always hear which voice you are following. You do not need to impress the world with sudden riches. You do not need to prove yourself to anyone. All you must do is take the next small step toward growth. Save a little, learn a little, build a little, believe a little more. Over time, these quiet steps will carry you further than you can imagine. The poor mind asks, how long will it take? The wealthy mind answers, as long as it takes. That patience, that perseverance, is itself a sign of wealth. And so I tell you, my friend, you are free to walk away from poverty. Not only the poverty of your wallet, but the poverty of your thoughts, your habits, your fears. Do not wait for the world to change before you change. Begin within and watch the world rearrange itself around your new spirit. Carry this truth with you. You were born rich in potential. All you need is the courage to claim it. This is the final word. Poverty is not your destiny. Renewal is. Wealth, true wealth, begins in you.